Nice to see everybody out this afternoon. Appreciate you being here. Glad we have representatives from the Department of Public Safety in case things get out of hand. Carl McDonough, appreciate you being here. Let's have an invocation. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to serve you, to seek your will, and to do your will. And I pray that you would bless us with your wisdom as we do our very best to do what you called us to. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. Amen. All right. Preliminarily, I will give you a little preview of what we're going to do today and next week. Today we're going to hear from Representative Nimmer on the report of the study committee on the truck weights legislation, and he'll be here to answer questions from the members of the committee. Today will not be a day for public comment. We're just going to receive the report and discuss that. Next week, I expect we will have a bill from Representative Watson. Oh, it's been a long day. Yeah. Sam will give us an updated bill that he's working on now, and we'll hope to have that in the next couple of days. And we'll be able to bring that bill up for discussion next week. We're going to try, I'm letting Abby know this for the first time, I think we're going to try to meet on Tuesday next week. And that way we'll make sure to have plenty of time before the week's over to get through that piece of legislation. And we'll get you the notice, of course, of the time and location of that meeting on Tuesday. So, without further ado, what we've been waiting for a long time. Where do you want? You can stay here. It doesn't matter to me. Do y'all want him down there so you can grill him, or is he okay up here? I would have a motion for you to go down there. So. No, stay here. Stay here.
Yeah, because that just got weird.
Yeah.
Easy, buddy.
Mr. Rutledge will ask you to refrain from other public comments this time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, and those in attendance in the audience. I appreciate your patience with us as we've been trying to come up with some way to present a finished product to both the full transportation committee and to everyone who's been engaged and involved, both giving input either for or against. And I think we had a real good wrap-up study committee the other day and lasted a little better than an hour. I felt plenty of good time for great comment on both sides of the issue. And I stated in that committee meeting that day that I would have a written report to issue. And the more that Chairman and I discussed it and the complexity of the reports that came in, and I just want to kind of give you a visual right here, and we're going to touch on them in just a minute, but I think there was the idea that I was going to do a PowerPoint today. That is not true. I want to make sure everybody knows there's not a PowerPoint presentation going to be shown today by me, and I do not have a written report other than what I've tried to condense into a one-sheeter. And that's taken some time, and I've talked with the chairman back and forth, and I've tried to talk to people on both sides of the issue. Representative Watson, I want to thank you publicly for your patience. He has been trying to get me to move along with the hearings and move along with getting a report out. But I think I've tried to make myself very clear that my fundamental obligation as the study committee chairman was to be down the middle and give everybody ample time to bring me their evidence and their opinions and their data to defend their position. And I was overwhelmed with evidence and data and positions. So that brings us up to where we are today. To kind of tell you where we are, we've got a list of associations and groups that are for the General Assembly addressing a truck weight bill of some sort. Now, that bill, we don't really know what it looks like, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. Then we've got some who are deadlocked against it, no matter what that bill looks like. And they've got their data for the reasoning on both sides. The studies that we've looked at include studies from the University of Georgia, FRA, which is a national forest company, ATRI, American Transportation Research Institute, and the National Technical Information Services, they're headquartered in Virginia. Found a lot of good data. A lot of people bring me things that were highlighted out of it, dealing with multiple axle issues, dealing with changing the configuration as we know it with 5-axle trucking. I want to be real clear. My understanding from the author of the bill and the understanding and the direction of the study committee has never been to address adding a 6th axle. It's always been taking what is existingly known as a 5-axle truck, not changing the height, width, or length of it, but addressing a 2-ton proposal within it, therefore raising the gross weight. That led into the discussions about road wear. We've talked with GDOT about the technical side of the pounds per square inch and bridge structures and everything that Josh has been very good to me in bringing me information. We've heard from GMA and ACCG about county road wear in our cities, and we've even heard that heavier trucks by 2 tons can damage historic awnings. While that may sound a little bit unique, that's a point that needed to be made, and it was made, and it wasn't taken lightly. Everything that we've heard, we've tried to digest, take into consideration as a study committee. One of the things we looked at and continually was brought up, and for the audience here in the committee to take into consideration as Representative Watson makes a decision what he wants to do with this bill and how it'll be drafted, is parity in trucking. And when I say parity, that touches a lot of things. If you notice these gentlemen across the back that are charged with keeping the public's safety at best interest, when they pull a truck over and it has 5 axles, they've got to determine what it's hauling, where it's going, what the point of pickup and delivery is. There's different radiuses for different commodities. There's different tolerances for different commodities. There's some things you can have a permit for and some things you cannot. And so there was the ask to make some parity movements in 5-axle trucking in Georgia. Now, does that mean bringing some weights up and bringing some weights down? That conversation will be had as y'all give us feedback and this committee debates it. But I believe it's our obligation while we're looking at it to make sure that we do what we've said we're going to do from the entire time and keep safety at the front of every conversation. Now, with that, we can also help our officers, the men and women that are on the streets, protecting us and making sure that everybody's in compliance by helping streamline some of the ways that they have to look at and go over a vehicle once it's pulled over transporting products. So a lot of things go into parity with trucking, not just making weights equal for all 5 axles, but also streamlining the way that fines are cited and looking at how they're cited. I've heard people tell me when we talk about an 80,000-pound truck with a 5% tolerance, that some that exceed 84,000, their fines are adjusted back to 80 and added forward from there. And I've had truckers in the state of Georgia reach out and say, no, our fines start from 84. So there seems to be a difference and maybe confusion, and I think we owe it to our officers to help hear from them and help them clarify in law so there's no confusion on where fines start. Do they start at 80 or do they start at the adjusted weight of 84? I mentioned the radius earlier. I think we owe it to the truckers, to the growers, harvesters, the buying points, everybody included in any issue or any commodity, that the radiuses are equal. Buying points are further out than they used to be. I think at the study committee we heard an example of peanuts being hauled in little red wagons. Now they're going a lot further. They're being hauled in tractor trailers and they're going a lot further. And I think currently, Colonel, I apologize for asking you a question, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I believe right now ag products are a 100-mile radius. Is that correct?
Is it the parity issue in hours of service, or is it a different question? I'm having a little fun with it, sir.
I understand. I understand. But is a 100-mile radius on ag products?
It's 150 miles.
150 miles. Now, we've had an ask to move that up to 200 or 250. I think there's another radius addressed in that code section, and I think it's fair to y'all to have one radius for all these products that we're talking about. But that takes industry buy-in, industry input. You know, we've got to understand how far are we trucking product. The variance increase has said, well, why don't we give people more of a variance if we're dealing with hauling product different, and we're dealing with harvesting timber in a different time, or we've now, my understanding is you can harvest peanuts with a higher moisture content because of the ability to dry these peanuts when they get to a buying point. So do you leave the weight at 80,000 and go from a 5% to a 10% tolerance? Do you give them that much of a wiggle room? And then everything always came back to road wear and safety. I know this has been a year-long study that was driven out of HB 411, and I'm telling you as condensed as I can a summary of everything that we've discussed. I want to be very clear that safety's been at the lead of every discussion. We have heard from GDOT has led the charge on that, I think, because everything they have an issue with as far as maintenance comes back to a safety issue. Mr. Chairman, I know there's going to be some questions from the committee. I anticipate that, and for the sake of just continually saying the same thing over and over as we do sometimes, I'm going to turn it back over to you, sir.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a question first of all, just for the benefit of the members. Can you tell us, when you're talking about a 5-axle truck, can you tell me what that means?
All right, that's a tractor with a steering axle is one. You got a set of tandem rear ends on the back of that truck. That's number 2 and 3, and then the trailer it will pull will be number 4 and 5. So your trailer has two axles, a tandem. The truck has a tandem. That's the back 2 rear ends, and then the front steering axle, and that's your 5-axle configuration.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I left one point off. The other thing that the study committee was approached about and asked about is, do you ask for a permit? I think one of our neighboring states requires a permit to go up to what would be a 10% tolerance for what would be equivalent in Georgia, and that's our sister state, Florida. You have to buy a permit down there, an annual permit, to be able to haul up to 88,000 pounds. So the discussion there is, all right, well, if we decide to address this, everybody always likes to ask the question, how much and where's the money go? And so those are things that I'm anticipating will be a part of the conversation in this committee. And Mr. Chairman, I think that's it.
And another question I had, you talked about parity in trucking for 5-axle trucks in Georgia, and I want to make sure I understand what you're talking about there too, because it sounded like you were talking about parity between different industries that are using similar truck configurations in the state of Georgia. And did you, when you talk about parity in trucking, are you also talking about parity between the state of Georgia and other states? Is that an issue you're still bringing up, or is that issue kind of resolved?
Both. So it's parity for the trucks in Georgia, and Georgia being competitive and leading that competitiveness initiative to be parable with other states around us that we do cross-line commerce with.
Okay.
An example of parity within the trucking industry in Georgia, I think you can get a 5% tolerance on cotton and poultry, but you can't get a 5% tolerance on chips and shavings. And these are all commodities that are moisture driven. And so we need to look at, are we being fair? If we picked a winner and a loser somewhere inadvertently, and those are all issues that come up with the parity part.
And on the parity issue with the out-of-state or the neighboring states, I sat in part of the last committee meeting, and I don't think we had a clear answer at the end of that meeting whether other states have higher weights than us for these truck configurations. Did you ever get a clear answer on what the states around us are doing?
Yes, sir. I'm trying to find the paper right now. Florida has the capability of buying a permit going to 88,000. North Carolina is at 90,000.
Is that their base weight is 90, or you can permit up to as a variance? I'm
not sure if someone on the committee may know, and I'm sorry, it's in one of these reports here somewhere.
Okay.
Alabama's 84 base, and Tennessee is 84 base, and South Carolina is equal to us. And what we were told on South Carolina is their legislative body is trying to tackle the same issue we did last year in a funding mechanism for new revenue for their roads and bridges. And what we're told is as soon as they find out what that funding mechanism is, they're going to go in and try to address truck weights as well. I want to know that they've got the ability to fund stronger and better roads and bridges before they do anything different. I'm going off of memory, committee and those in the audience, on the weights on the surrounding on the weights on the sister states. Do you have it right there, Josh? Did I quote it right? Tennessee 84, Alabama 84, Florida 88, and tell me what it is.
Tennessee 80, South Carolina is on non-interstates is actually 73,000.
Okay.
280, 80,000 on the highways. North Carolina's 80,000.
North Carolina's 80.
North Carolina's 80. Florida's 80. Alabama's 80 on the interstates and 84 on the non-interstates.
Those are very conflicting numbers from not challenging you, but
Submitted to the Congress just in this last year.
okay. Very conflicting numbers from what is right.
Let me ask clarifying.
That's a base weight.
That's the base.
That was my question was going to be, is that base or does that include permits and variances? So those are all base weights. Okay. So there may not be a real disparity between what you said and what he said, but we just need to figure that out.
And for the sake of confusion, when I reference a weight, I'm referencing the highest weight possible by state law.
Okay.
I want to make sure I'm clear on that. So if I reference Georgia, I would say 84 right now for the commodities we're talking about because it's 80 and a 5%.
Okay. Let's see. All right, let's see. Anybody have any questions? Any questions for Representative Nimmer at this time? All right. Is that Representative Carson? Yeah. Okay.
Chairman Nimmer, thank you for bringing this forward. Chairman. Yeah.
Thank you for the promotion.
Yeah. Let me ask this, Chairman Coomer. What is your plans? Are we going to study this further, or is it subject to more questions? Or
Yeah, the plan is.
Before I ask Chad.
The plan for now is to get a reflection of what was brought up in the report as much as we can, and kind of hone in on some of the maybe some of the areas we're going to want more information about, such as I've just asked about the weights from other states, and then in the subsequent meetings, which at least the next meeting on Tuesday, what I'm hoping is that Representative Watson will have a substitute for the committee to consider in detail, and I want him to be ready, and I want the members of the associations and the experts in the field to be ready to answer some of those questions we're asking today, but also be ready to talk about his bill next week. So we're not voting on anything today.
Right.
But if you've got areas of concern that you want to hear fleshed out more fully, either today or in the next meeting, this is a good time to ask.
The only thing that I would ask Representative Coomer, sorry, Nimmer.
I'm with you, man. Come on.
Is I just look at items from a risk-benefit scenario, and I think we've discussed the risks of what was contained in House Bill 411. I'd like to know what are the benefits to areas that are not served or don't have as much of a presence of the timber industry. What are the benefits to the entire state of Georgia when we pass a bill like this? And I'm not asking for an answer now, but that's just kind of what I'm thinking about representing my area, my district, and so forth. And you don't have to answer that. I'm just something that would be something that I would be interested in. I clearly see the benefits to the timber industry and related industries, not just that. Mm-hmm. But you follow where I'm going.
So Representative Carson, the nuts and bolts of that question is how's it going to help your people? Right? It's their representative helping to craft policy to help Georgia. That's it. That in a nutshell. I don't know your district that well, but if you don't have peanuts, cotton, and poultry and whatever all else, timber and everything in that subsection that this touches.
We have bankers and braves, that's all we have.
Bankers and Braves, I really don't have anything for you there. So, I'm sure at some point y'all enjoy some 2x4s in some of your buildings and cotton on your back. And
Well, Chairman, now he's got me calling you Chairman.
this is working out good for me, in case y'all wonder.
Mr. Nimmer, I think I'd like you to kind of address that a little more in terms of the risk side of that with regard to districts like Representative Carson's. And, you know, what are the risks to the metro counties in particular?
I think the risk to your folks, I'll try to touch on where I think you're going and maybe where my mind just went. So, somebody from your district's going to travel down to Jekyll Island and spend them a nice long weekend on Georgia's beautiful Jekyll Island. They could see a 8 to 12% reduction in the trucks that are hauling these commodities. They won't see as many on the road. The question then bears, does the industry by naturally grow and you see more anyway? Well, it could, but it's still 8 to 12% reduction whether it grows or not. So your constituents traveling out are going to be in what one of the arguments were, a safer environment. The flip of that is, you know, commerce in Georgia helps everywhere, whether it's driven in your city or not. And when you're talking about ag and forestry and the areas that are affected here, they're very important to the revenue of this state, and it takes everyone in the body to make it work. And so, you know, not putting words in the author's mouth down there, but I think the original intent was to try to give some help to a suffering area. And the trucking industry for these commodities in rural Georgia are suffering. Mm-hmm. And by virtue, if they stay healthy and can get themselves healthy, it helps your area. With the amount of tax dollars that are generated and the revenue that is brought into this state just through natural trade and commerce, it's going to help your area.
There would be an incremental amount of tax dollars because of the economic
impact? I said if we can get ourselves healthy, if the industries that we represent can stay healthy, they won't go backwards. This is a tool to help keep ag and forest products healthy.
Okay.
If it starts going backwards, you could see it go the other way. Then those revenues have to be increased somewhere else.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I just want to follow up on that because I wasn't really clear in my question. In talking to members of the committee offline, one of the things that I'm really aware of is a concern that by increasing the truck weights, if we were to do that, or increasing the variance, that we would necessarily be leading to a greater wear and tear on the roads that many of us depend on to get us to and from this building and to and from our jobs in the metro area. What do you say to those folks who are concerned about, you know, the Gwinnett's and the Cobbs and the Henry counties where, you know, where we're already dealing with congestion and needing transportation infrastructure relief? What do you say to those folks about this particular issue?
Well, I know Representative Harrell shared a picture with me in Gwinnett County of a log truck in his county, but off the cuff, I'd say I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of these trucks in your area that we're talking about. I've been up here for 7 sessions now, and I haven't seen a peanut truck or a log truck or a chip truck in this area. I am sure at some point in time those trucks do travel through these areas, but nowhere near like what the affected areas of growing and manufacturing these products are. You're just not going to see it that much. Granted, the vice chair of the study committee does have a picture documenting differently, but how often does that happen would be a question I would have to find out, you know.
And I know we're going to deal with a substitute for the bill, but the bill as it is written now, and frankly, listen, I don't talk about the bill, but what you talked about the study committee, were y'all looking at changes just to state roads, state routes and county roads, or are you looking at, is this going to affect interstates as well as county and local roads and state roads?
No, I don't think we have the authority to touch an interstate road, so it's just state routes is what we're talking about.
Okay. I'm not sure. Bill? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During this process, what do you feel is the major pushback? Is it the safety concern? Is it the infrastructure, repair cost on the roads? What do you feel is the major concern?
The number one, now granted, I've been real clear that we said that safety was going to be our priority, but we've heard more about road damage. Now, road damage creates a safety hazard, so I guess they go hand in hand. That's been the number one pushback, but again, that's why, everybody said this is terrible timing to jump on something like this right after you pass that HB 170. I can't find a better time to jump on it than when you're fixing to start firing up construction crews. If the state is ever going to have the appetite to address truck weights, it needs to happen before the construction takes place.
Right. I guess, obviously I'm not an engineer. Never played one on TV either.
We're together.
But 8,000 pounds additional on a truck on a highway, it's hard for me to imagine, a truck at 80,000 causing any more or less than 88,000. Are there any studies or anything, that we can, look at as far as?
I've got an enormous amount of documentation stating on both sides of it. Some where it's saying it does, and some saying that no, in fact it doesn't. Over the lifespan of a bridge, shaving that lifespan off by 2 months was one of the reports we got from Georgia Tech, and so it's been tossed around, and I guess it comes down to who's studying it and who's writing the report. I hate to say that, but that's been the reality.
Did you get conflicting reports on that?
Josh and them do, yeah. GDOT's got some different evidence stating that, but I'm sure at some point when truck weights got to where they are, it was a robust debate and a battle. I don't know anybody that's going to say, I am for something that could potentially tear up a road and cost me money. But I just, in my mind, not being an engineer, Representative Rutledge, like you, I don't know where 2 tons, we're talking about 2 tons, 4,000 pounds, I just can't find in my mind where that's going to create that much problem. But that has steered us into the area of, is the real problem these trucks? And one of the things the study committee looked at was, do we need to take some of the higher end and bring them down on 5-axle hauling? I don't want us to forget that's one of the components of this that has been brought up during the study committee. Do we need to look at, and that's part of the parity issue.
So we're talking about 4,000 pounds now, not 8,000?
No, currently these trucks haul 80,000 pounds with a 5% variance. That's 84.
Gotcha.
And the ask was for, Representative Watson, you may want to chime in there and get me clear on your bill, but it's approximately 2 tons, am I correct? That's right. Okay.
Anything else?
No.
All right. Anybody else have any other questions? All right, Representative Carson.
To Chairman Coomer, I just wanted to bring up just the possibility that if we expand or increase the limit for unfinished wood products, we just had this move over bill last year that Representative Harrell carried for, was it sanitation trucks? Was that what? Okay, and then I supported that bill, voted for it, and then this year we had a common sense measure to expand that and to include utility trucks and so forth. So my concern is that if we were to do this for unfinished wood products, some other industry is going to come forward. Maybe it's the utility industry. They want to use this for poles. And have you thought about what the inclination would be if we do this for one industry? Would there be other industries that would come to the table and say, "Hey, we want this increased weight limit for our trucks"?
Yeah,
that's all.
I appreciate the comment. I think it's reasonable to think that way.
Mr. Chairman,
yeah,
I think it was Representative Harrell that actually brought that up in Dublin, that we don't need to get in the business of picking winners and losers when the bill was tailored to unfinished wood products, and that's when we went to what's in that code section, let's make sure we address it all. And that way, if we do rise to tide, that all those boats come up together. If we leave it alone, they're all together, and not pick a winner out of there. So that came up in Dublin at one of our study committee meetings. And Representative Harrell, I'm sorry, I believe that was you, wasn't it, that brought that? Okay. Thought I was right.
Is this Representative Watson? Yep. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Member, did your committee look at any data that on accidents involving large trucks and like the locations of those accidents? So interstate highways versus state routes or county roads. I know we've got accidents total statewide, but we don't know where those accidents were. And on interstate highways, they're driving a lot faster versus state routes that have a lower speed limit. So I don't know.
I'm sorry, Representative Watson, I don't have the answer to that. What I have is a report here from the American Transportation Research Institute, and the one thing I've got right here is this study, it looked at driver behavior and how they act. It wasn't interstate or state route or county road specific. Now, granted, it's a pretty thick report. There may be somewhere in there that starts itemizing the routes that these accidents were reported on, but the one thing that stuck out to me, and I think, you know, and our friends at AAA and ACCG and folks that, you know, have expressed that they're not in favor of increasing weights, I think that we would all agree that a lot of times there's a lack of respect on the road for big trucks. And in this report, it states that independent studies by the Federal Highway Association, Transport Canada, AAA Foundation, and several state DOTs indicate that cars are primarily responsible for car-to-truck crashes in 75% of the instances. If that data is wrong, it's reported wrong. But whether they're on interstates or not, I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I mean, currently my bill is not any interstate traffic, not any interstate traffic. So you're looking at 70 miles an hour versus 55 miles an hour. So I would think there would be a difference in the accidents and safety there.
All right. Anything else, Representative Watson? Okay. Is this Representative Harrell? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Leader Nimmer, I appreciate you letting me participate on the committee and be involved in the hearings. And I would hope, I don't have all the reports you've referenced today, and I have not read those reports that you referenced today. So I would certainly like to avail myself of that opportunity, and I'm sure there are members present today that would feel the same way. So I would encourage you to figure out perhaps a way to, I don't know if we can get them online or something, and figure out a way to make have people to be able to share the information that you have and used, and I appreciate that. I think it would be valuable to everyone. From what I understand from our discussion today and presentation, and it sounds like Representative Watson is preparing a substitute that may expand beyond what 411 initially did. It may include other industries. It may include parity with radiuses and parity with weights and everything. That sounds, quite frankly, like a totally new bill. And I think there are a lot of people interested in this issue that would like to have access to that draft and that bill and that document to review it thoroughly. Not that couldn't happen as a substitute, but as is generally the practice, substitutes tend to make, not always, but they ought to make relatively minor changes to the original bill where a committee is already well versed on the basic subject and they can act. And I think our chairman, our new transportation chairman, has demonstrated time and again that he's going to be very judicious in moving forward when there is discussion. I have no doubt that that'll continue to be the case. You're correct in Dublin. I did kind of raise the issue, if we're going to make a change, let's try to look at all industries rather than just those that are cited. the discussion with interstates, it's my understanding that interstates are 80,000 pounds, and as you suggested, Mr. Nimmer, we don't at the state level have the ability to change that. In Dublin, a field representative for Senator Johnny Isakson rose and spoke and said that it was his recommendation that the state not make any change to any truck weights at all until the federal government, and they're on their way and they're doing their studies, make an adjustment at that level. I think we've put to bed the issue of the $100,000 trucks as being a non-divisible load. It's really not comparable what we've been discussing with this heavy truck weight issue within 411. It's a different animal. I am quite confident our friends here from Public Safety can speak to accidents on interstate highways versus county and city roads, and if my recollection is correct, we have significantly more accidents, and maybe not necessarily related to trucks, but quite often our county and city roads are where the most accidents actually occur. I could be wrong, but we certainly have people in the audience today that can answer those types of questions. So I appreciate that. I mean, I've learned a great deal going through this process, and you have been very deliberate in moving us through, and I thank you for that. I guess the closing comments, just want to kind of reiterate two things. The data that you've mentioned today clearly is valuable for us to be available to the entire committee and those interested in this issue. And then further, if it is going to be a substantially changed bill, I would just suggest that maybe we either agree that as a substitute it's going to move maybe at a pace that's different than traditional substitutes, or it might not be better served to have a new bill.
Let me jump in just a minute. Chairman Nimmer, if you're the chairman of the subcommittee, that's why I keep calling you Chairman Nimmer.
I'll take it.
Representative Nimmer, if you will provide the documents you showed, and I'll have Abby prepare that out for the members, and we can either email it out to all the members or make it available if members don't want it by email. And I think that would be absolutely a good thing for us. As to the pace of the bill, at this point, the committee has not considered any bill as such. I would expect that the author of the bill will bring to the committee the bill he wants us to consider, and obviously it'd be to his advantage to bring that sooner rather than later, so we don't have time to look at it before we get to the committee. And again, if that's provided to me, I'll make sure it's provided to the members, made available as broadly as possible. I will tell you, we're not going to do, the process of this committee is not going to be passed by ambush. We're going to take it as slowly as we need to, and spend as much time as we need to, which frankly is why we're meeting on Tuesday of next week, so that if we don't get through, we'll have time to deal with it throughout the week. So I appreciate the request, and I'm going to go back through all of these requests in just a minute, so we can make sure we're all on the same page before we leave today. But are there any other questions for Representative Nimmer? Or did you have something else to add?
If I may, Representative Harrell mentioned the 100,000-pound trucks, and for clarity there to the committee, what he's referencing is in some of our study committees and some of the conversations coming to me was we've got 5-axle trucks in Georgia that are allowed to haul up to 100,000 pounds with an annual permit. Now they have to purchase a permit. It got into a federal rule on what is noted as divisible and non-divisible. Thank you, Josh. Drew a blank there. And the reasoning behind divisible and non-divisible is understandable. If a load can be broken apart, if a seal can be cracked, we understand that and don't contest that. But it came up to the weight and the safety aspect of just, regardless of whether it's divisible or non-divisible, if a 2-ton increase on Sam's Representative Watson's bill is a safety and a road issue, then do we need to look at these 100,000 pounds? And those were a lot. I got questioned a lot on that, and I owe it to people to put it out there. And I appreciate you mentioning it, Representative Harrell, because I forgot. the truth of it is you can't split some of these loads. They're sealed by customs. You can't split them. But the question remains, we're talking about a 50-ton load at that point that's going across railroad crossings, that's going through, going on state routes and local routes to get to an interstate. So does that give us any kind of evidence or anything to talk about the 2-ton increase and the stopping distance and the impact on roads? And those are the questions that were raised for anybody that's curious when he mentioned the 100,000 pounds. The question was answered why on the divisible and non-divisible sealed containers, but then the other question remained on just the weight of the trucks. So,
Representative Rutledge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we know how many, when you talk about a 100,000 pound permit, is that per load? Do they get a permit every time they're going to carry that, or do they get a annual permit?
my understanding is an annual permit.
Do we know how many permits we have at 100,000 pounds?
Mr. Waller, do you know the answer?
I do not know, but I can confirm.
It may not be that many, but the question was just out there. And I really don't have an answer for those that were asking me.
Anybody else? Anybody else at all? All right. What I want to do is just kind of review back through some of my notes, and if anybody believes I'm missing something, then we'll give you a chance to tell me as we finish up. But the areas where we're going to want to have some good, relevant information, I think, going forward, especially, of course, depending on what the bill says once we see it, is we're needing information about parity in trucking within the state. What are the different standards for different industries that we're looking at, and we want to really nail down the question of what are the weights for our neighboring states, both the base and the variance weights. Excuse me. I want to hear about the, again, with regard to the parity within the state, the radius issue. You know, some vehicles have different radius that they're permitted to travel with a certain load weight, and I want to hear about those differences in the state. We want to know, to Mr. Rutledge's question, you know, is there any appreciable difference, or what is the appreciable difference in the wear and tear on the roads for a truck that is 88,000 pounds versus one that's 80 or 84? And whatever data we have for that will be useful. There's a question about where accidents are happening, and I would say that if we have data to show where there's an occurrence of vehicle wrecks, particularly regarding trucks that are the subject of what we're discussing, then that would be useful to talk about, if that is in fact data that's available. And then, of course, Representative Nimmer is going to provide the data he has been given to us so we can get that out to all committee members. As soon as we have well, first of all, did I leave anything out? Does anybody have a question that I did not put in that list that we want more data on? Yeah.
I'm turning the book over now.
Okay. So to give everybody a little planning opportunity, and let me ask you this, Sam, Representative Watson, I don't want to put you on the spot, so if you don't want to answer this question, you don't have to. But I am curious to know when you might have a draft that we can start looking at.
As soon as I can.
Okay, I'll take that as you put me on the spot and I don't want to answer that question. So I would just encourage you that the sooner the better, the sooner the better. And the more time we have to review it, the better the committee process will go. So what our plan is on Tuesday, presuming we have a new bill to look at, or a redrafted or substitute bill to look at beforehand, then what I'd like to do is set us up for on Tuesday to be able to handle public comment from interested parties. And to help us manage that process, because I expect, after having gone to a couple of these subcommittee meetings, there are going to be a lot of interested parties. But then again, once you see the bill, maybe your party doesn't have an interest in the bill when it's all put together. But if you get a chance to look at the bill, and then I'd like you to sign up, or at least give Abby a call and let her know that you're going to be coming and who you're bringing to talk to us. And you know, if we have 3 people sign up, I'm not going to put any limits on time, but if we have 30 people sign up, in fairness to everybody, we'll start limiting time. So we'd like to be able to plan that in advance the best we can. I will commit to the members and to the public that we will not, we're not going to push this through without thinking it through. And so that means if we have to have 2 committee meetings or 3 committee meetings to get through this process, we will. I do want to have an action by the committee, one way or the other, in sufficient time before day 30 that we can get this bill, give it a final decision in this committee, one way or the other, so it's not lingering past the end of the session. Any questions? Any comments? We are, I almost said it, what?
Is it appropriate to dissolve my study committee now?
Actually, your committee is set up as a special subcommittee that was created by the chair, and I think the chair has the authority to dissolve that special subcommittee, and so your special subcommittee is hereby dissolved.
So I no longer have to be down the middle.
We now have to call you leader chairman instead of leader member instead of chairman member. All right, we're adjourned.